Welcome back to this special collection of springtime memories. What spring was complete without that hated of all chores, spring cleaning? Father was particularly not a fan of the annual ritual, as A. Talbot relates in Spring Cleaning 80 Years Ago.
In the good old days, women had few status symbols to glory in, and probably the most coveted of those in rural areas were a woman's reputation as a good cook and as a good housekeeper. My mother was both, and she took quiet pride in her ability as a careful manager and in keeping her family comfortable and well fed. This was a full-time job because the housework was done with elbow grease, a broom, and a washboard. The appliances we take for granted nowadays were practically unknown 80 years ago. It required all the help a woman could get from any daughter she might be blessed with, and if she was fortunate enough to have a hired girl, who often bore the brunt of the work, all pitched in and did their share. Two important events took place in the well-run household: spring and fall cleaning. Spring was the major of the two upheavals, for upheavals they were. From the attic to the cellar, and even the woodshed and the outhouse, all were given a thorough going over, and before the job was completed, every member of the family had a hand in the activities. My mother went about spring cleaning much as a general laid out the plans for a coming battle. The timing of the operation had to be taken into consideration. She had charge of raising the baby chicks, of planting the garden, with some help from the older children after school, and a bit later on the overseeing of the picking of the strawberries. Thus, it was necessary to have the extra inside work done early and out of the way so she was free to spend more time in her outdoor tasks. As it was, she had to sandwich some of the outside work with the house cleaning. In our state of Michigan, it's usually cold enough to need some heat in the house during the spring months, but the house could not be cleaned until the stoves were taken down, so the carpets could be taken up, and no good housekeeper wanted new wallpaper and freshly painted rooms endangered by smoke from a balky stove the first weeks after it was put on. There were some hardy souls who prided themselves on having the stoves down for the summer by the 1st of April, but this was much too early for my father, who disliked being uncomfortable in the evenings to countenance. The 1st of May was the earliest he would allow. If there were rooms to be papered, during the winter months Mother and the girls could be found sitting by the base burner poring over wallpaper catalogs. To choose the right paper was highly important because it had to last for several years. One had to be selected that wouldn't show the soil of an occasional puff of smoke, a suitable and pleasing pattern was desired, and a paper chosen that everyone liked and one the family purse could afford. As I said, spring cleaning was somewhat like a series of maneuvers of war. Mother laid her plans early, and her first point of attack was my father. A loving, generous man to Mother and his children, who seldom denied us anything in his power to give, he became a different person at this time of the year. From a jolly, sunny disposition, he became complaining and short of temper. To any and all who would listen, he declared he loathed having the house torn up. He despised taking down and setting up stoves, and to have to sit in the kitchen, the only warm room in the house if the evenings were cool, seemed more than he could bear, and he complained long and bitterly. Every spring I prayed for warm weather to come early, but my prayers were seldom answered. How Mother stood up to all the work involved in her changed husband I could not understand, but she was made of stern stuff and went serenely about the business at hand. Early in the campaign she laid siege. First, she mentioned to Father the rooms that needed doing over, and she wasn't above resorting to strategy bordering on trickery to get her way. One time a neighbor jokingly remarked that we must like the paper in the parlor because it had been on so long. Now this was just the ammunition Mother needed. She told my father what had been said, and that it irked her. And to have Mother hurt or annoyed was not to be tolerated. And Father said if she wanted to paper the parlor and show Issy Stearns a thing or two, to go ahead. Mother thanked him, and then asked if he didn't think it would be cheaper and better to paper the sitting and dining rooms at the same time, so the mess would be over and it wouldn't be strung out a room a year. Father fairly caught gave in with a groan. "I suppose so." The order for the wallpaper, paint, and needed supplies would be mailed early, and the paper hangers, two brothers noted in the community for their good workmanship, engaged weeks ahead of the time they were to come. Early in March, starting with the attic, the upstairs room were cleaned one at a time. Mother made her own wallpaper cleaner and a special solution she used on the woodwork. I can still remember their pungent, clean odor. The work did not usually require any help from my father, and went along smoothly. Next came the cellar. We bundled up and went downstairs, armed with brooms, brushes, a pencil and paper, and while we cleaned, we took note of what fruits and vegetables were left over, and planned on what and how much to can in the coming months. We sorted apples, sprouted potatoes, dipped our fingers into the big crocks of sauerkraut and pickles, and sometimes cracked a few butternuts as we turned the work into a game. What happy days those were. The kitchen and pantry were cleaned. Then the china, glassware, choice vases, and bric-a-brac from the corner cupboard in the dining room were washed and carefully put away again for another year. This cup and saucer is one my grandmother brought from England, and is over 100 years old, my mother would tell us, and now I tell it to my grandchildren, adding 50 years to its age. Now, all was in readiness to start on the parlor, sitting, and dining rooms. The night before the stoves were to be taken down, my oldest brother would be sent to my grandfather's hardware store in the village for the stove truck. Early the next morning, after a good breakfast, for mother was particularly careful to prepare dishes my father liked during these trying days of cleaning. Father, Ed, our hired man, and the boys would start with the parlor stove, then the base burner in the living room, and small sheet metal heater in the dining room. The girls and mother were careful to keep out of the way, but on the alert to help if needed. As I look back, this was a family affair anticipated with excitement and a tinge of apprehension because Father was anxious to get a disagreeable job over with, and he was not in the sweetest frame of mind. On one memorable, never-to-be-forgotten occasion, the hired man, a good worker but woefully clumsy and a bit hard of hearing, had jerked the stovepipe from the wall as my father was looking up and showered him full in the face with soot. An expletive burst from him that caused my mother to cry out, "John, remember the children," while we struggled to keep from laughing. As if to add insult to injury, the hapless Ed misunderstood Father's "Move it a mite to the left, Ed," and he released the catch on the truck, letting the stove down on Father's foot. We children were always aware of his temper, but his vocabulary was beyond our wildest imagination, and nothing Mother could do stemmed the flow of colorful language that poured from his blackened face. In spite of the fact Father's foot was hurt, we children were beside ourselves with shouts of laughter. Years later, "Move it a mite to the left, Ed," brought peals of mirth and became a family saying to be used on many fitting occasions. Father said later, after he was washed, his foot bandaged and resting on a stool, he had the most unnatural young'uns he ever saw. They laughed themselves silly at their father, who might be maimed for life. With Father seated in the kitchen by the range, and as comfortable as Mother could make him with a cup of coffee and a piece of blueberry pie for solace, Ed, the boys, and Mother got the stoves down and out of the way, so the paper hangers could come the next day. To my knowledge, as long as my brothers were at home, that was the last time Father had anything to do with stoves. While the rooms were being papered and painted, the carpets were taken out and put on the line and beaten by us boys. The women washed and stretched lace curtains, polished the furniture, washed windows, and made everything spick and span. How we worked! And Mother, cooking big meals for the paper hangers, was every place at once, marshaling her little troop of workers and doing twice as much as anyone else. The woodshed and the outhouse were done in a hurry. Usually this was a job for the boys, but if there was any wallpaper left over, Mother gave the outhouse a new look besides its regular cleaning. As usual, Mother was on schedule. May the 1st found the house clean from top to bottom, but as so often happened, the evenings were nippy, and Ed, with us children, would sit around the table in the kitchen playing games. Father would have his rocker wedged in one corner fussing, and Mother would be busy with the never-empty mending basket. It was a cozy time, except for Father's carping, and we welcomed warm weather and a cheerful parent with joy. Then things were back to normal, and spring cleaning was over for another year.
Speaking of spring cleaning, here's a poem by the same name, written by Harriet Whipple.
Spring cleaning back in Grandma's day was something we would dread, unless a child were young enough to think it fun instead. We would know when it was coming by a gleam in Mother's eyes, when the sun in early April brought warmth and clearing skies. From the attic to the cellar, each closet, stair, and room was attacked with soap and water and scrubbing brush and broom. The heater in the living room was banished to the shed, and mattresses were taken out and aired from every bed. Kitchen cupboards got a scrubbing, and all the contents too. Then every shelf was finished with paper bright and new. Rugs and carpets got a beating as they hung upon the line, a dusty task I hated and thought should not be mine. We would whack them with the beater, a handled wire affair, and the winter's dust was loosened and flying everywhere. Old papers from beneath the rug were gathered up to burn, and new ones placed so carefully before the rug returned. If the funnies were among them, though they'd been seen before, we'd stall a while to read them, spread out upon the floor. It was Buster Brown in those days, and just to name a few, Boob McNutt and Jiggs and Maggie, and the Cats and Jammers, too. Winter clothes and heavy bedding were washed and put away, and all this must be accomplished before the 1st of May. Every window must be polished, a task for girls to do, and every curtain washed and starched, and ironed by Mother, too. There were often rooms to paper, and painting to be done, and all this time the family seemed always on the run, with meals all late and sketchy till the battle had been won. Though it surely was chaotic, spring cleaning must be done.
After a hard day cleaning the house, many housewives settled down and listened to radio soap operas like Ma Perkins. But no self-respecting, red-blooded, all-American boy would be caught dead listening, right? Well, not so fast, buckaroo. Ed Knapp got an earful from radio adventuress Ma Perkins.
In 1934, at the rascally age of 10, I was forever seeking high adventure and excitement. The home entertainment center, the radio, helped me to fulfill that compulsive need. Every weekday after grade school classes were excused, I would dart home with the speed and intensity of a wild stallion. Never but once did I fail to arrive in time to turn on the trusty 5-tube radio in the living room to listen to a series of children's 15-minute adventure programs, including Buck Rogers, Jack Armstrong, Tom Mix, Dick Tracy, Radio's Orphan Annie, Don Winslow, and many more. When I arrived home, breathless, I found the walnut-colored wooden radio cabinet still warm. Perhaps only minutes before, my mother had turned off the set after listening to a series of 15-minute adult dramas. They were commonly known as soap operas, and rightly so, as they were sponsored in large part by soap companies. These soaps, which Mom enjoyed with a passion, were heavily embroidered with family clashes, lost loves, tragic events, tearful partings, and angry exchanges, all leaving deep emotional wounds. These trials and tribulations went on 5 days a week, month in and month out, with few solutions. I learned about their sad content one day when I was sick and unable to go to school. Those sad soaps didn't impress me. Perhaps I was too young to appreciate the stories, but I couldn't understand what she found so fascinating about those endless tales filled with heartache. I couldn't avoid hearing about the unhappy relationships and other woes, even far off in my bedroom upstairs. Mother had the radio volume turned up extra loud so she could do all her household cleaning, upstairs, downstairs, and even in the basement, without missing a single melodramatic word. Certainly I knew there was a world of difference between what Mom liked to listen to and what I enjoyed. I was so glad I got home in the latter part of the afternoon, when I could be transported to my world of adventure heroes. Their tales of surprise, intrigue, and suspense kindled my young imagination, sparking imagery as real as life itself. It made such an impression on us when we were young that today, as senior citizens, we still remember those long-ago radio adventures. Summer, when school was closed for 3 months, was wonderful. The longer days went well with all the things we had to do: skinny dipping in the old mill pond, bicycle riding, sandlot baseball, Saturday afternoon movie matinees, picnics, games like kick the can and hide and seek, and sand pit BB gun skirmishes. Now don't shoot your eye out. The only thing I didn't like about the season was the fact that most of my 15-minute radio adventure programs left the airways until fall. I missed them as much as I would have missed a close playmate who had left town for the summer. I couldn't wait for their return. I remained a dedicated radio serial adventure enthusiast for several years. In 1938, when I was 14, summer again arrived, school closed, and as usual, my action radio friends left the air until late September. That year, I had an invitation to visit my aunt in Chicago. I figured that without the company of my favorite radio friends, I might as well go visit my relatives and see the city too. I soon made friends with some of the interesting neighborhood children. We had fun with high-life paddle contests, marble games, sidewalk choke, setting off firecrackers, and going to the neighborhood movie house. One afternoon, most of my new friends had gone here and yon, leaving me to my own devices. There didn't seem much to do but loll about my auntie's apartment. She had the same fascination with radio soap operas as did her sister, my mother. She had just tuned in Oxydol's Ma Perkins, a highly acclaimed series among the soaps. Aimlessly, I flopped onto her flower-patterned couch while she worked on laundry. It seemed like it was going to be a very boring afternoon for me. I didn't figure it would be proper for me to turn the radio dial to another station, so I steeled myself for the domestic dribble I was sure would follow. I made an effort to pay attention to the Ma Perkins broadcast, but something happened in the storyline that caught my attention. It seems there was a traveling circus had come to Rushville Center, Ma's hometown, and the gorilla's cage door had been left open. The huge, menacing beast had escaped, and its whereabouts were unknown. Rushville's inhabitants were alerted to the danger with emergency radio bulletins. That day's episode ended on that note. I was beginning to get interested. Hungry for adventure, I was in front of the radio set with my aunt the next day. When the program began, the narrator explained that the rampaging gorilla had wandered into Ma's neighborhood. Entering the open front door of Ma's two-story house, the gorilla had climbed the stairs to the second floor. Ma, totally unaware, was in the backyard tending her flower garden. Ma soon strolled back into the house and started to go upstairs to get some needle points she wanted to finish. Just as she started climbing the steps, the program ended. The announcer reminded us, "Tune in tomorrow," as if he had to tell us. My aunt and I could hardly wait to tune into the radio at 3:15 p.m. the following day. It was almost as good as listening to my after-school adventure programs. The story continued where it had left off. Ma was climbing the stairs, unaware of what awaited her. When she was halfway up the stairs, the telephone rang. So she turned and came back down to answer it. Then once again the episode ended as Ma headed upstairs. My aunt and I were beside ourselves. Ma Perkins was a 5-day-a-week soap. When was it ever to end? The following day, the story once more picked up with Ma heading upstairs. This time her ascent was interrupted by a knock at the front door. Ma answered the door and was introduced to a salesman hawking his wares. Ma was busy but too kind to turn him away. She took the time to listen to him, then she showed him out. And the program ended. It was Friday, and Ma Perkins wouldn't air again until Monday. I never did learn the outcome, because I returned home on Saturday. But that occasion changed my young mind somewhat about soap operas. Sometimes they weren't dull. At this point, I guess I'll never learn if Ma ever climbed those stairs and came face to face with the snarling gorilla and what happened next. However, Ma Perkins remained on the air for the next 22 years until 1960, so there must have been some solution to the peril she faced back then. I never understood why the story moved along so slowly, until I realized that for the sponsor, It meant listeners, and the sale of more Oxydol laundry soap. Ma Perkins had to become an adventuress, and she had a new young fan.
You won't be satisfied until you break my heart. You're never satisfied until the teardrops start. I tried to shower you with love and kisses, but all I ever get from you is nagging and breaking. My poor heart is begging the way. You taught my heart to cry in shame. I'll bet you wouldn't like it if I did the same. You're only happy tearing all my dreams apart. You won't be satisfied until you break my heart. You won't be satisfied until you break my heart. You're never satisfied until the teardrops start. I tried to shower you with love and kisses, kisses, but all I ever get from you is nagging and bragging. My poor heart is begging all the way. You knocked my heart around the crying shame. I'll bet you wouldn't like it if I did the same. You're only happy tearing all my dreams apart. Oh, you won't be satisfied until you break my heart. Until you break my heart.
That was Break My Heart, performed by the Demarco sisters on The Fred Allen Show on February 24th, 1946. Uncle Josh was a favorite on the vaudeville circuit and then on Edison's new talking machine in the late 1800s and early 1900s. Glen Kartin remembers when the whole family laughed as they sat listening to Uncle Josh.
While rummaging through a stack of 78 RPM records at an estate sale last summer, I was pleasantly surprised to find several by Uncle Josh. Uncle Josh was really Cal Stewart, a stand-up comedian who was probably as popular during the early 1900s as Jerry Seinfeld is today. Seeing Uncle Josh's name on the record label was like running into an old friend I hadn't seen in many years. It brought back memories of my family, sitting around the Victrola, listening to Uncle Josh's humorous, rural, homespun monologues, spiced with his infectious laughter. Telling his tales from the viewpoint of a country bumpkin, Uncle Josh told us about eating at Delmonico's in New York City, attending the opera, having his photograph taken, buying an automobile, and going to the dentist. These fragile records had survived world wars and the Depression. I knew I was holding a small piece of home entertainment history in my hands. From his descriptions, Uncle Josh Weatherby's hometown of Punkin Center could have been Gown, Minnesota, the small farming community where I grew up. It didn't take a lot of imagination to identify with the adventures and misadventures he bungled through. His wife, Aunt Nancy, and their friends, Esri Hoskins, Dean Weatherspoon, Cy Pettingill, Ruby Hendricks, Steve Jenkins, and Cindy and Jim Lawson were always around to give Uncle Josh helpful advice. In those days, when masculine and feminine roles were clearly defined, Uncle Josh was ahead of his time. In Uncle Josh Keeps House, his attempts to do the household chores while babysitting Cindy Lawson's son during Aunt Nancy's absence resulted in something akin to organized chaos. After tripping over Aunt Nancy's apron, he hit his head on the stove, knocking down the stovepipe and scattering soot all over. Alerted by squawking chickens, he found the cat trying to catch one of the chicks. Chasing the cat, he ran into the clothesline. Before it was all over, the Lawson boy caught his finger in a mousetrap and fell into the wash tub, and the smokehouse caught fire. Cindy Lawson accused Uncle Josh of abusing her boy, and Aunt Nancy commented, "A woman can't leave home a minute. Men are such helpless critters." As Punkin Center didn't have a barber shop, Aunt Nancy used the sheep shears to cut Uncle Josh's hair, making him look, in his words, like an escaped convict or a fur coat that had molted. When he visited a regular barber shop in New York City, a whole crowd went to work on him. One fellow went to blackening his boots, and another went to cleaning his clothes, while a gal went to whittling his nails. The talkative barber asked Uncle Josh 4 times to have some bay rum. When he wouldn't drink it, the barber put it in his hair. When Uncle Josh returned to the farm, it took a full minute before Aunt Nancy recognized him, and for a week he was a stranger in his own home. The dog tried to bite him, the horse kicked at him, the cow wouldn't let him milk her, and he couldn't get within gunshot of anything on the place. Then the next Sunday, the minister preached a sermon about Delilah cutting Samson's hair. "Gosh all hemlock," Uncle Josh drawled. "Everybody knowed he was hittin' at me." Years before Mae West crooned, "Come up and see me sometime," to Cary Grant in the movie I'm No Angel, Uncle Josh asked the people he met in New York City to come down and see me sometimes. As long as Uncle Josh records exist, his wit and timeless humor will continue to entertain us.